When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
This episode is brought to you by Jack Daniel's. Jack Daniel's and music are made for each other. They share a rhythm in the craft of making something timeless, while being a part of legendary nights. From backyard jams to sold-out arenas, there's a song in every toast. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Jack Daniel's and Old No. 7 are registered trademarks. Tennessee whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Jack Daniel Distillery, Lynchburg, Tennessee.
It feels like the political class is having a real masks-off moment, doesn't it? Like yesterday, we get this news that a Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine has a Nazi tattoo on his chest. Over the weekend, the president posted an AI-generated video of himself dumping shit on protesters. And then there are the group chats. So many group chats.
I've been thinking about Nixon had his tapes, and it feels like the Trump people have group chats, or at least DMs.
I think that's a good analogy. I feel like we're in the era of the toxic group chat.
It's true, yeah.
David Graham writes over at The Atlantic. As the group chats piled up, I called on him to walk me through them all. First, there was the chat with about a dozen young GOP operatives referring to black people as monkeys and the watermelon people, while calling rape epic and joking about gas chambers. Then this week, a whole other chat went public. In this one, a Trump staffer compared Martin Luther King Jr. to George Floyd and mused about ending the annual MLK holiday.
It's really astonishing.
Is there one exchange that caught your attention?
It's just hard to outdo I Love Hitler.
It's interesting because I think some members of the GOP, they want to point at Democrats in this moment and say everyone is getting coarser these days. Like in Virginia, you have this Democratic candidate for attorney general who's been caught texting some pretty vile things. And the difference in that case to me seems like there isn't a whole community built up to support what he's saying. He's pretty quickly slapped down by the person he's texting.
Right.
And there's no egging on or joking there. Is that important?
I think that is important. I also think it's like, it's I don't want to slice too thinly here. It's obviously, I hope, really bad to talk about shooting your political opponents. It's also a different kind of bad to be joking about Nazis. I have broadly socially abhorrent views about groups of people.
And I'm cool with that.
Not only am I cool with that, I think I will be cooler if I show you how edgy I can be about it.
I think there's something about a group chat where there's a bit of competition to be the funniest in there.
Yeah.
You want to get there first and make the joke. You think you're with trusted friends.
Yeah. You want to one up. And if your one-upmanship happens to be demonstrating your bigotry, then that is the direction it will go. And if your one-upmanship is just making bad puns, as in many of my group chats, then I'll make some really terrible puns. And it would be embarrassing if somebody saw them, but not in this kind of way.
Today on the show, where exactly is this increasingly amped up, sometimes straightforwardly racist discourse leading us exactly? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. This process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. At the time that David Graham and I spoke, Tuesday morning, the Republican group chat getting the most attention involved a White House attorney named Paul Ingrassia. He was up for a position leading the Office of Special Counsel, and his confirmation hearings were supposed to take place this week. Ingrassia withdrew from that process late last night, partially because of what he'd said in these chats.
So Politico produced this story, and I just wanted to stop for a moment and say the headline on this story was Trump nominee says MLK Jr. holiday belongs in, quote, hell, unquote, and then he has, quote, Nazi streak, close quotes, according to texts.
Whew.
Right. And like, this is no knock on Politico's reporting. I feel like once you read the text, the headline kind of undersells it.
Oh, no.
Like it feels worse once you're able to read them. It's just hard to get an excerpt that conveys all of it. It's just like sort of plainly racist things.
I mean, he says MLK Jr. was the 1960s George Floyd, and his
I don't even
holiday,
know what that means.
I don't either. I'm like
they're both black? I don't get it.
Yeah, that's it. That's like what they share.
Right.
And his holiday should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. Like, what?
I don't know either.
We should say one member of the chat writes back, Jesus Christ, after, like, clearly, like guy, get it together.
Right. And in another case, one of them says, Paul belongs in the Hitler Youth with Ubergruppenführer Steve Bannon, which is, I think, an attempt to sort of like, they're kind of playing with it, but they're like, you're crossing the line. And Ingrassia's answer is, I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time. I will admit it. There's no backing down. I don't even want to read these things because they're so offensive. It's just like, it's not okay.
Yeah. And we should say that Ingrassia is claiming these texts might somehow not be his, like they were manipulated, or in the era of AI, somehow they were like falsely created, but Politico is standing by its reporting.
Yeah. And I think normal people probably are not familiar with Paul Ingrassia, to their credit. If you are familiar with Ingrassia, I don't think these texts are all that hard to believe.
Why do you say that?
Well, so for example, he's got connections with Nick Fuentes, the neo-Nazi who had dinner with Trump and Kanye West. These sentences make no sense. Also to Andrew Tate, the rape accused far-right influencer and human trafficking accused. Ingrassia spent a lot of effort defending January 6th defendants, including one who also was a neo-Nazi. People may remember pictures of him with a little Hitler mustache. So, in some ways, the things that he's saying in this chat are just they're only a few degrees beyond the kind of associations and statements that he's made publicly.
I want to underline, if Ingrassia became the head of the Office of Special Counsel, he would be in charge of an agency that investigates federal employee whistleblower complaints and discrimination claims.
That's right. And he's also, he's far younger and less experienced and less credentialed than other people who have held this job.
He's 30.
Right. And his major credential is that he is a really loyal Trump soldier, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the first sign of trouble for Ingrassia. He was accused also in Politico of sexual harassment in his current job, I guess, at the Department of Homeland Security. And the story's really wild. It's that he canceled a female staffer's hotel reservation and then is like, surprise, you have to stay in my room.
Yeah. It feels like something from another decade entirely. It's just totally wild.
Yeah, I gotta ask, the fact that it looks like Ingrassia may not get this particular job that he's up for, I do sort of wonder if it matters. And I ask that because there's been a lot of performative, like, rejection of the people involved in these group chats. Like we've seen, for instance, the other group chat scandal where it was a bunch of young Republican operatives, a bunch of Republican Party people in the states have been like, oh, that we don't stand by this. We think the guy in Vermont who's a state senator, he should step down. Like there's been firm statements like that. But I really wonder how far that goes. And I say that because we have examples of people who've said noxious things in the Republican Party, done noxious things, and they get sort of tapped down and then they pop back up again, That's
right. Yeah. There are lots of people who were rejected in the first term who have come back in the second term or who were rejected from one post and end up in some sort of like non-confirmed post. If you think about the people who are permanently banished from Trump's orbit, it has nothing to do with their, extremist associations. It has everything to do with whether or not they criticized Trump and the terms in which they did so. So you can criticize Trump and even come back if you are careful about it. But it's, the Michael Cohens of the world who are banished permanently, or the, John Boltons, the James Comeys, the H.R. McMasters, these folks who are openly critical of Trump. That is the really only truly fatal sin for him.
Last night, when Ingrassia seemed to take himself out of the running for the special counsel job, he wrote on X that he does not have enough Republican votes at this time. He vowed to continue serving the administration to make America great again. After the break, when racist language boils over into racist policy. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks makes it easy to find the perfect gifts and holiday looks that suit your personal style. The holidays can be a whole lot of things. Fun, relaxing, but also a little stressful because you've got a long list of friends and family and you gotta find a gift for everyone. If you go over to Saks.com, I guarantee it's going to jumpstart all of your ideas for what you should be getting your friends and family. It is the only website on the internet where you're going to find super high-end luxury Prada sneakers next to a crystal floral A-line gown from MacDougall. And then that's right next to a Cynthia Rowley ombre long-sleeved wetsuit. These are things I did not know existed until I went to Saks.com. And now I'm like, maybe I should be getting a bathing suit for my mom this Christmas. Maybe. Going into this holiday season, I feel confident Saks is there to help me find inspiration, curate a holiday wish list, pick out gifts for my loved ones, and have a look ready whatever might come my way. Whether it's an office holiday party, a cozy night in, or a vacation getaway, Saks has got everything you could want. If you're looking for shopping to be personalized and easy this holiday season, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to shop for everyone on your list.
The Trump administration is gutting environmental protections on a scale never seen before, opening pristine wildlands to drilling, rolling back pollution standards, blocking clean energy projects, weakening species protections. But there's a movement that's fighting back, and it needs your support now. The Natural Resources Defense Council combines the power of 3 million supporters with 700 lawyers, scientists, and advocates. This community gives NRDC the collective power to hold corporations accountable and win in court. That's how they won nearly 90% of cases against the first Trump administration, protecting endangered species, blocking harmful pipelines, and safeguarding clean air and water. Every victory happened because people refused to stand by and do nothing. Join this powerful movement preserving the natural world for future generations. Donate at nrdc.org/next and your gift will be matched 5 times.
Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise, or wherever you listen. I wonder if we can talk about how we're seeing this gutter racism in these group chats spill out into actual policy. Because the policy is where you can neaten up these ideas a little bit and make them into something, but make them into something that lasts. You know what I mean? That lasts longer than just like a funny joke with your friends. Like, you've singled out changes that the Trump administration is considering to U.S. refugee policy. Do you want to dig into that with me? Just explain what seems to be on the table here.
Yeah. So there was a story that came out last week in the New York Times about how the Trump administration wants to overhaul the refugee system. And, in the past, the refugee system has brought in people from around the world in dire straits. In the first Trump administration, the number of refugees permitted was reduced drastically. Trump has worked again to do that. But now, in addition to that, there are plans at the state and Homeland Security departments to basically rework the system into a way to allow in white Christian Western people.
How would that work? Like, how do you single those people out?
Well, first you have to define who's sort of being targeted. So they say they're worried about Europeans who are, quote, targeted for peaceful expression of views online, such as opposition to mass migration or support for populist political parties. So what that means is, for example, supporters of AfD, Alternative for Germany, the far-right party in Germany, which has been, JD Vance has been critical of Germany for using basically anti-Nazi laws to crack down on the group. And he's attacked Europe for its free speech regulations. And so now they want to go a step beyond that to giving people political refuge because they've fallen afoul of these laws, basically.
I mean, you've called what's happening here a funhouse mirror version of the Great Replacement theory. What do you mean by that?
Well, so, the Great Replacement theory, just to recap, is the idea that liberals and cosmopolitans are trying to bring in people of color who can replace white people and change the kind of fabric of America. And this is something that I guess Tucker Carlson is probably the most prominent exponent of. But you've heard it in one form or another from many people on the MAGA right. And what you see here is an attempt to bring in people who fit the Trump vision of what America should be, which is white, Christian, at least culturally Christian people with, quote unquote, Western values.
So we're replacing this burgeoning diversity with something much paler.
You get this obsession with kind of like keeping America the way it is. But this isn't just that. This is, bringing in Afrikaners, for example. It's bringing in far right Germans. It's bringing in a particular kind of far right people. And I would say not only that, but it's at the same time that you see Republicans also kicking people out of the country via mass deportation programs. So overall, you see this attempt to build a more white America.
One of the more affecting things you wrote about recently was about how President Trump is rewriting the letter that newly naturalized citizens get from the president. I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, every newly naturalized citizen gets this letter from the president, and obviously it changes term to term. How is Donald Trump's letter this term different from previous letters? And what does it tell you about how he's trying to change even how new immigrants think about the country that they're joining?
So I think there's two things that stick out at me. One of them is, I mean, this seems so obvious, but previous presidents tend to talk about the idea of America as a nation of immigrants, or they talk about people coming into the melting pot, or you can choose whatever your cliche is on this. But they talk about the way that people come into the U.S. and becoming a part of the country makes it stronger. Often presidents will use the phrase nation of immigrants. You don't see Trump talking about the word immigrants in this letter. But the other thing that I think is more telling is previous presidents have talked about America. What makes America is democracy. It is this diversity and strength. That's not what Trump is interested in. Trump is interested in culture. He's interested in heritage. And the question is, what is the culture and heritage that he is interested in people subscribing to? And I think the refugee policy tells us a lot about what that is.
Yeah. I mean, this letter, you point out that the word nation is capitalized in this letter. Donald Trump uses this phrase, the United States is now your homeland. Like, it's all of these little tells that I think a casual reader might miss, but that are deeply connected to a white nationalist idea of what the country could be.
That's right. Yeah, it is all it's not, they're kind of dog whistles or these little things that are not on their own necessarily all that surprising. And to be honest, when I read this letter the first time, I sort of skimmed it and it didn't make much of an impact on me. And it was only when an editor suggested that I compare it to some past ones that these things started to jump out and the changes started to jump out.
Yeah. I want to talk about one more way that not the Trump administration, but conservatives more generally, may be chipping away at how the United States sort of incorporates diversity into our project. Redistricting. Some states are talking about redistricting, including California, to change who has what kind of say politically, racially. And the Supreme Court is, of course, hearing a case this term about the Voting Rights Act. And a lot of people are concerned, given the oral arguments we just heard happen, that the justices are interested in kneecapping the Voting Rights Act and giving essentially Republicans the power to redraw districts in a way that would let Black Americans have less of a say of who they have in Washington. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that case and how you see that fitting into the larger project we're talking about?
Sure. So it's been clear, particularly in a lot of deep South states, but not exclusively there, that what you would have is lawmakers drawing maps that would break up Black voters so that they would be a minority in every district, even if they were a substantial part of the population. And so in a state like, say, Mississippi or Alabama, where Black voters vote overwhelmingly Democratic, you could draw a map that would not elect any Democrats. So you'd have, 30, 40% of the population never being able to elect a representative of their choice, basically. So the Voting Rights Act allows for these majority-minority districts where you would draw these districts that would be predominantly Black, and they would elect, again, generally in the South, Democratic members. But the Supreme Court has been, and generally the American conservatives have been pushing back on this idea for a long time. They argue that this is discrimination on race. That, as John Roberts said years ago, the way to stop discriminating on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. And so they would like to get rid of these districts. And what that would do is it would basically knock out almost every Democratic district in the Deep South, with possibly a few exceptions.
That's stunning.
It's amazing. And increase in political, Republican representation as well.
Yeah. I mean, so I've been reading about this moment, trying to understand it through a historical lens. And the time period I'm looking back at is right after the Civil War, when Reconstruction is in full effect, but especially people in Washington, especially the Supreme Court, are involved in figuring out how far the federal government should be doing to guarantee the rights of especially Black citizens. And to me, it's powerful to look back on that moment now because you can see some of the same debates that are being had at these very high levels now happening then. Like in the 1880s, there was a decision from the Supreme Court about civil rights law at the time. And the majority opinion has this quote saying, "When a man has emerged from slavery, there must be some stage in the progress of his elevation when he takes the ranks of a mere citizen and ceases to be the special favorite of the law."
Wow.
And I felt like John Roberts or Brett Kavanaugh could be writing a sentence like that now.
Yeah. It sounds very much like this sorts of things. It's the colorblind society, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure how many Americans understand that similarity.
I mean, I still think we don't, as a country, adequately understand Reconstruction and redemption. And people don't understand that Reconstruction was not a failure. Reconstruction was sabotaged. And it's sabotaged in the same ways that we have seen cyclically, repeatedly through American history since then.
Yeah. So what do you want to leave us with in this moment? Because I feel like for a listener of this show, it really does feel like we're floating along. Lots of terrible things are happening if you're paying attention. And it's hard to get purchase.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just sort of wondering how you would offer that to a listener.
So I wrote a story about some of these things late last week, and I wrote it after being away on vacation for a few days. And it was just, coming back to the news and seeing all of these things at once, seeing the Young Republican group chat, seeing the refugee policy, seeing the Supreme Court oral arguments over the Voting Rights Act. And then all these, the Border Patrol had these anti-Semitic videos, and just like you see all these other things, but to kind of come at it anew was really bracing. And it was not obviously a positive feeling, but I did find it really helpful to be able to sort of step back from the day-to-day news and then see these things in one place and get a little perspective.
And then, of course, on Saturday, you saw the No Kings protests.
And then on Saturday, I saw the No Kings protests. And it's just astonishing, I think, to see so many people out. And maybe this is a connection to the civil rights question. We talk about how proud we are of the civil rights movement, at least in notional terms. Even the Supreme Court, if not necessarily Paul Ingrassia, celebrate the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s as a good thing. It's a good reminder that those protests were deeply unpopular. Only a small portion of the population supported them. Even people who favored quote unquote racial progress thought that these protests were going too far, or they're going too fast. And something like No Kings is so large and so popular with so many people. And I think it's a good reminder that although there are Paul Ingrassias out there, I think they are they're important to pay attention to because they have a lot of power in the Republican Party, but they're not a big portion of Americans. And I think most Americans do reject this sort of thing. And they're looking for ways to make their voices heard. And one way they did that was to come out on Saturday.
Yeah. Then, of course, Donald Trump released an AI video of himself dropping a load of shit on the protesters. So then that happened. And we're back where we began.
Right.
Unfortunately. I'm leaving in a bad place. I'm really leaving in a bad place. But David,
I think it would be false hope to leave it in a particularly better place. You don't want to you don't want to shine up something that doesn't deserve it.
That's true. David, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
David Graham is a staff writer over at The Atlantic. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Paige Osburn is the senior supervising producer of What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the head of audio at Slate. Ben Richmond is the senior director of podcast operations. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
Rinse takes your laundry and hand-delivers it to your door, expertly cleaned and folded, so you could take the time once spent folding and sorting and waiting to finally pursue a whole new version of you. Like Tea Time You. Or this Tea Time You. Or even this Tea Time You.
So did you hear about Dave?
Or even tea time you.
So update on Dave.
It's up to you. We'll take the laundry. Rinse. It's time to be great.
And Doug.
Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.